Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. I was reading in Elder Bruce R. McConkie's The Millennial Messiah, and I came across something that I had not thought about before. And it's so interesting, you guys, because you have these different doctrines and prophecies having to do with the second coming. Things like the 144,000, the two witnesses, the New Jerusalem, and on and on. And after almost 5 years, next month, it's going to be 5 years that I've been doing this full time. You would think that we had covered most of these things pretty thoroughly, and I feel like I have. But I'm reminded of a conversation that I had with my friend Troy with the Last Dispensation channel at the beginning of my channel. Tragically, he passed away earlier this year. But when I first started my channel, he became one of my first friends on YouTube. And he was giving me advice and telling me about his experience in running his channel. And he said, you'll go through the different prophecies and doctrines of the second coming, but then you'll be like, well, now what? And I was like, well, I don't know if that's going to be true with me because I'm doing these spreadsheets and I'm collecting all these quotes and scriptures, and there's a lot out there. I'm sure it's going to take a while. There have been a couple times within the last year or two where I've been like, well, maybe Troy was right. There's only so many scriptures and quotes. But no, I know that there's still more to do, and it probably isn't going to end. I'm going to continue to look into this because there's so many little details, including things like what I'm about to share with you. So this has to do with the final war, Gog and Magog, as well as the Battle of Armageddon. And there's a number of different concepts here, a number of different quotes and scriptures that I've added to my spreadsheets. So we're going to start with this paragraph right here. This is on page 452. We're reading this on archive.org. All right, he said, yet another passage in which Isaiah is speaking of the second coming in the millennium. We select these words relative to the final great war. For by fire and by his sword will the Lord plead with all flesh, and the slain of the Lord shall be many. I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me. For their worm shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched, and they shall be an abhorring unto all flesh. Now back to Bruce R. McConkie. Not only shall the dead bodies of the slain pollute the earth, but their spirits shall also be cast into hell, there to suffer the torments of the damned. All right, before we continue, there's a few more paragraphs I want to read. I want to talk about this concept of the number of people that will die because of the final war. And right now, specifically, I want to talk about the concept of there's going to be so many that they're not going to be able to be buried right away or maybe buried at all. Let's go to my spreadsheet called Quotes Prophecy Fulfillment Tracker. I'm trying to find, I'm trying to collect all these different prophecies, but I'm mostly interested in any time that a modern day prophet or apostle has said that something has been fulfilled or has at least is in fulfillment, partially fulfilled. Well, this is one that may be a partial fulfillment, an ongoing fulfillment. The idea that there's so many that have died that you can't bury all the bodies. There are a few scriptures that deal with this. So, and we've covered this before. I'm just going to point to this one. This is Ezekiel chapter 39, verses 9 through 12. Excuse me. And they that dwell in the cities of Israel shall go forth and shall set on fire and burn the weapons, both the shields and the bucklers, the bows and the arrows and the handstaves and the spears, and they shall burn them with fire 7 years. So that they shall take no wood out of the field, neither cut down any of the forest, for they shall burn the weapons with fire, and they shall spoil those that spoiled them, and rob those that robbed them, saith the Lord God. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will give unto Gog a place there for graves in Israel, the valley of the passengers on the east of the sea, and it shall stop the noses of the passengers, and there shall they bury Gog in all his multitude, and they shall call it the valley of Haman Gog. And 7 months shall the houses of Israel be burying of them, that they may cleanse the land. Now, that may sound very specific, and maybe there is going to be a literal fulfillment of that. You know, 7 months to bury the dead, and 7 years to destroy all the weapons of war. That may literally happen, but I do want to point something out. And this comes from Elder Bruce R. McConkie in this same book, The Millennial Messiah. We're looking at my spreadsheet called Quotes, Common Misconceptions. The topic is timing of the second coming. The misconception: we know the exact order of events before and after the second coming. We will also know when prophecy has been fulfilled completely. So, from Elder Bruce R. McConkie, this is on page 251 of The Millennial Messiah. He says, Jesus' next statements seem to be commentary and explanation relative to the events that will happen both before and after his coming. It is not always possible for us in our present state of spiritual enlightenment to put every event into an exact category or time frame. We are left to ponder and wonder about many things, perhaps to keep us alert and attentive to the commandments should the Lord come in our day. I think that means, in other words, don't think that, well, Christ is not going to come because we're still waiting for this. I know when this is going to be fulfilled, so we don't need to worry about it. We still have 100, 200, 300 years before the second coming. There's some people that think that, by the way. Continuing, and some of the prophetic utterances apply to both pre and post millennial events. Some have an initial and partial fulfillment in our day, and it shall have a second and grander completion in the days ahead. So, with that in mind, let's go back to this spreadsheet called Quotes Prophecy Fulfillment Tracker. I essentially have one, two, three. I have three scriptures, one from Isaiah, one from Jeremiah, one from Ezekiel, that talk about this concept that during the final war, there's going to be so many that die that they're not going to be buried, and or it's going to take a long time to bury them. I was thinking about that, and I was thinking along the lines of another spreadsheet that I had already created um, for what could be the war of Gog and Magog when we're thinking about Israel, because it seems to all center around Israel and the Jews. I've looked at all these different wars and um, operations and conflicts and um, intifadas and stuff that Israel has experienced since it became a nation, and I've wondered if all of these together is the final war, or maybe this is Armageddon, because I think the classic idea is that no, it hasn't started yet. It's going to be very obvious, and I wonder if the war is so big that it's comprised of all these conflicts. Israel has had four existential wars: the War of Independence, the 6 Day War, it's these ones here in red, the War of Independence, the 6 Day War, the Yom Kippur War, and most recently, the Hamas War, which doesn't seem to be complete. I mean, the Gaza portion, it hasn't been finalized, and it seems to have spread out to other groups and nations, including Iran. Even though this war with Iran is separate, I don't think it really is. The point is, I wonder if the collection of all of these together is the War of Gog and Magog and or the War of Armageddon. Likewise, I wonder if when we're talking about all the nations of the earth being involved in uh, the Lord taking out his sword and punishing all the nations, I wonder if this involves just all wars that have taken place ever since the first vision, or maybe even more specifically, since the American Civil War. If we go to Doctrine and Covenants 87, we have this prophecy of Joseph Smith. Verily, thus saith the Lord concerning the wars that will shortly come to pass, beginning at the rebellion of South Carolina, which will eventually terminate in the death and misery of many souls. And the time will come that war will be poured out upon all nations, beginning at this place. So I wonder if the War of Gog and Magog, which would include Israel and ultimately, at least toward the end, will be centered around Israel. I wonder if this was the beginning of it. And I asked Grok a question about since 1820, have we had very many wars and conflicts where combatants were not buried because of the sheer number of those that died? And it gave me an answer to that, and I've added its answer to this spreadsheet. So I'm going to read it from here because it'll be easier to read, and I have my highlights. So this is what Grok said. You have these different wars, starting with the American Civil War. It said, after battles like First Bull Run or Antietam, uh, about 23,000 casualties in one day. Many bodies were left in the open for days or weeks due to the lack of organized burial details, heat accelerating decompensation, or decomposition. Oh my gosh. And the priority of the wounded. Some were buried in hasty mass graves or left where they fell. The next one is the Taiping Rebellion in China. This massive civil war, death toll estimates 20 to 30 plus million, saw widespread unburied corpses due to the scale of fighting, societal collapse, famine, and disease. Unburied bodies littered landscapes, symbolized dynastic failure, and contributed to further crises like disease and reports of cannibalism in extreme cases. World War One. This is the next one. Trench warfare, artillery, and mud made recovery extremely difficult, especially on the Western Front. In places like Somme, I don't know if that's how it's pronounced, or Flanders, bodies were often submerged in shell holes, destroyed by explosions, or lost in no man's land. Recovery was delayed or impossible under fire. Post war, tens of thousands of Commonwealth soldiers and others were never found or identified. Estimates suggest about 55,000 bodies in Belgium alone may have remained on or in the battlefields. Many missing are commemorated on memorials like the Menin Gate. Some remains are still discovered today. Burial parties operated when possible, but the numbers, millions dead, and conditions meant mass graves, partial recoveries, or bodies left where they fell. So this is just with these three wars so far: the American Civil War, the Taiping Rebellion, and World War I. So if Gog and Magog is not just like a single war that we would recognize as a single war, if it's all these wars combined, starting with the American Civil War and including everything that's happened in Israel, then maybe this is already happening. You know, the level of destruction, the number of deaths, and in this case, the number of bodies that have been left unburied. This is one way that prophecy may be fulfilled in a natural way that allows for the prophecy to be fulfilled, but for us to also um, not know the day or the hour. Yeah, like Christ said in chapter 24 of Matthew, that he will come in an hour that we think not. And that's one of my big problems with, if there was one single war and we were looking at X in the news and they're talking about, millions and billions dying, that would be a really big hint as to the timing of the second coming. People would uh, suddenly want to repent, and it just seems to be contradictory to the purpose of Christ coming in an hour that ye think not. So the righteous will recognize the signs and have an idea that it's close, but I just feel like it would be much too obvious if there's like one big war where literally millions of people are dying or billions of people are dying. I feel like this is a way that it could be fulfilled. Um, let's just read the rest of it here. World War II. Similar issues occurred, though systems improved over time. In intense fighting, for example, Pacific Islands, Eastern Front, or urban battles, bodies could remain uncovered for tactical or practical reasons. Many U.S. dead were later repatriated or placed in overseas cemeteries, but not all remains were found. And then there's other wars. Other examples exist in smaller or more chaotic wars. For example, some colonial conflicts or civil wars with mass atrocities, where bodies were sometimes deliberately left unburied as terror tactics or due to total breakdown of order. In modern times, post World War II, international norms and better logistics have reduced this, but it still happens in overwhelmed or denied access areas. In summary, the scale of death in industrial wars often outstripped the ability to bury the dead promptly or at all, leading to temporary or permanent unburied remains. So, this is the thing that I never really thought about. It's a way that this big war, if I'm correct, that this big war could be happening in a way that we can recognize but still be caught off guard when Christ comes if we're not watching for the signs of the times. Um, I think that there's a really good chance that this could be it. I'm not going to say that for sure, of course. It's just my opinion or just a observation. But yeah, let's go ahead and let's go back to the Millennial Messiah. By the mouth of Jeremiah, the Lord sent a message to all the kingdoms of the world which are upon the face of the earth. The ancient prophet was to take the wine cup of the Lord's fury and cause all nations to drink it. He was to say to them, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, drink ye and be drunken, and spew and fall, and rise no more, because of the sword which I will send among you. It is to the nations of the earth that are and shall be in our day that these dire words are addressed. They shall all fall by the sword, and none shall remain or rise again, or be a nation or a kingdom thereafter. And of course, this goes along with the idea that when Christ comes, he's going to make a full end of nations and he's going to be the king of the entire world. All right, continuing. For I will call for a sword upon all the inhabitants of the earth, saith the Lord of hosts. Lo, at long last, all men in all nations in all the world are to feel the wrath of the Lord. Sorry, let me get rid of that purple. Oh, it shouldn't be there, but it is. This is from a search that I did earlier. Anyway, therefore prophesy thou against them all these words, and say unto them, the Lord shall roar from on high, and utter his voice from his holy habitation. He shall mightily roar upon his habitation. He shall give a shout, as they that tread the grapes, against all the inhabitants of the earth. A noise shall come even to the ends of the earth, for the Lord hath a controversy with the nations. He will plead with all flesh. He will give them that are wicked to the sword, saith the Lord. Almost all men upon all the face of the earth will be wicked. A few only will stand in holy places and find a covert to shield them from the terrible storm. As to the others, the wicked shall slay the wicked until there are few men left. It shall be an awful day. And then here's the last paragraph. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, behold, evil shall go forth from nation to nation, and a great whirlwind shall be raised up from the coast of the earth. And the slain of the Lord shall be at that day from one end of the earth even unto the other end of the earth. They shall not be lamented, neither gathered nor buried. They shall be dung upon the ground. How many will be slain, and who shall count the number of dead bodies? When we come to the revealed description of the battle itself, we shall see that the slain shall be a third of the inhabitants of the earth itself, however many billions of people that may turn out to be. So again, I wonder if it's being done in a natural way, in not such an obvious way, because I feel like if we got to a war where literally, say, 2 billion people were killed, that would be a super, super obvious sign that the second coming is near. And I don't think that it's meant to be that way. I'd like to know, ever since the American Civil War, how many people have died in war. That might be a topic for another video, but we may be approaching that number of a third. If you take the whole world's population since the American Civil War until now, and you look at all who have died, just, I don't know, and think about all the different wars and conflicts that have taken place across planet Earth. Don't just think about World War One and World War Two. Think about all the different civil wars and different attacks, sometimes by individuals. Um, there's a lot that may not be so obvious. So, what I did is I added a few of these to my spreadsheets. I have on my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z an entry for Gog and Magog pre-millennial. I have to distinguish between the post-millennial Gog and Magog, because there's going to be another battle fought at the end of the millennium, which will also go by the name Gog and Magog, but we're talking about the one before the millennium. And I added one of these quotes to this row 261 for Gog and Magog, pre-millennial, all nations, because before this video, I tried to answer the question, are literally all nations going to be involved? And then when it comes to Israel, are all nations going to be against Israel? And to answer that just really quickly, we have this from Elder Bruce R. McConkie. This is from Mormon Doctrine. The prophecies do not name the modern nations which will be fighting for and against Israel. But the designation Gog and Magog is given to the combination of nations which are seeking to overthrow and destroy the remnant of the Lord's chosen seed. So I've heard this said before by people that all nations are going to be against Israel, and that's not true. There are some that are going to be for and some that are going to be against. We have this really interesting statement from, at the time, Bishop Joseph L. Worthland. Or wait, no, I'm confusing him with Joseph B. Worthland. Anyway, this is Joseph L. Worthland, presiding bishop of the church, and it's the October 1958 General Conference. And I've never seen, I don't think, a general authority or general officer of the church ever do anything like this, but he was talking about this final war, and he said, these nations of Russia, China, Korea, Syria, Israel, Egypt, Arabia, Lebanon, all of these nations are now in an attitude of war of some kind. Just what the results are going to be, I do not know. Of course, from the revelations we can and do know that someday there will be one great war in a certain area. that area possibly may be in and around some of these countries I have mentioned, probably around Israel. So it's just interesting that he was talking about specific countries, and he did say that he was speculating, but I decided to save this on my spreadsheets because maybe he has that speculation on good authority. Um, but anyway, it does seem that all nations will be involved in one way or another, and it may not all have to do with Israel. It may be all these wars that have been happening since the American Civil War, uh, that the whole world is being punished with warfare, but the central component of it is Israel, and the culmination of it is in Israel when Christ comes to the Mount of Olives to save the Jews. And then another interesting thing, I have a row called Cleansing the Earth. And we have this quote from President John Taylor, Journal of Discourses. As a people or community, we can abide our time, but I will say to you, Latter-day Saints, that there is nothing of which you have been despoiled by oppressive acts or mobocratic rule, but that you will again possess, or your children after you. Your rights in Ohio, your rights in Jackson, Clay, Caldwell, and Daviess counties in Missouri, which I just want to point out. I did have an ancestor that lived in Jackson County, Levi Jackman, and I had others that lived in Caldwell and Daviess counties and Clay County. I feel like I'm a fulfillment of this in my family. He continues, will yet be restored to you. Your possessions of which you have been fraudulently despoiled in Missouri and Illinois, you will again possess, in that without force or fraud or violence. The Lord has a way of his own in regulating such matters. We are told that the wicked shall slay the wicked. He has a way of his own of emptying the earth of the inhabitants thereof, quote unquote. A terrible day of reckoning is approaching the nations of the earth. The Lord is coming out of his hiding place to vex the inhabitants thereof, and the destroyer of the Gentiles, as prophesied of, is already on his way. These are some of the phrases, like some of these scriptures that he's quoting, that have to do with Gog and Magog in the final war. And in this case, he's relating it to the whole world, and specifically to the United States and the saints returning to these lands of inheritance. And so this suggests that what I'm thinking might be true, that all these wars are the Lord emptying the earth, and the wicked slaying the wicked, and things being cleared for the second coming and for the millennium. The last thing I want to cover is this row on my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z, row 165, Destruction of the Wicked, How Many Will Remain? Because Elder Bruce R. McConkie talked about that in what we just read, that few will remain, but I just wanted to read a few more things. We have this from Isaiah chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. Behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. And it shall be as with the people, so with the priest, as with the servant, so with his master, as with the maid, so with her mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller, as with the lender, so with the borrower, as with the taker of usury, so with the giver of usury to him. The land shall be utterly emptied and utterly spoiled, for the Lord hath spoken his word. The earth mourneth and fadeth away, the world languisheth and fadeth away, the haughty people of the earth do languish. Um, we have this from Elder Bruce R. McConkie. This is the Millennial Messiah. First, the cleansing the vineyard, the burning of the earth, and the destruction of the wicked by fire shall all come to pass in a short time, in a single day. So in this case, he's talking about the fire. There's basically, from what I gather, kind of like two big things at the time of the second coming that destroys the wicked. You have this war, the final war that we're talking about, the wicked slaying the wicked, but then you have a final destruction in the fire that attends the second coming. And from what we've studied, the burning is a result of the glory of the Lord. When you're in the presence of a resurrected being, in an exalted being, um, you have to have special protection to be physically in their presence. That's why in the scriptures you have various prophets who are physically changed so that they can withstand the presence of the Lord. But if you don't have that change, then you're consumed. And we're going to have Christ as well as all the other exalted, resurrected saints with their glory that's going to come to the earth. And that's why during the millennium, our bodies are going to be changed. The earth itself is going to be changed to a paradisiacal state, but those that remain that are not consumed, their bodies are going to be changed. They're going to be quickened, translated, whatever word you want to use. So this is talking about the burning. In a single day, as it were, and there will be but few men left on earth. I will remove the iniquity of that land in one day, the Lord told Zechariah. And in Isaiah, we find numerous prophetic expressions phrased in that imagery in which he so excelled. Many houses shall be desolate, even great and fair, without inhabitant. Those sent to raise the warning voice to the world are to do so until the cities be wasted without inhabitant, and the houses without man, and the land be utterly desolate. And the Lord have removed men far away. In the day of the Lord's coming, the light of Israel shall be for a fire, and his Holy One for a flame, and it shall burn and devour his thorns and his briars in one day. It shall consume the glory of the forest and of his fruitful field, both soul and body. And they shall be as when a standard bearer fainteth, and the rest of the trees of his forest shall be few, that a child may write them. Behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. The land shall be utterly emptied and utterly spoiled. Therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. Who can doubt that there will be but few men left at the beginning of the millennium? All right. Well, that's all that I want to cover for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.